Kingston, Jamaica, a city of vibrant culture, wealth, and secrets. Amidst the towering resorts, luxury yachts, and elite social gatherings, one man stood at the pinnacle of power, Michael Sinclair. To the public, he was a self-made billionaire, the man who transformed Jamaica's tourism industry into a global empire. With a net worth surpassing $2 billion, he owned 5-star resorts, private islands, and a chain of luxury hotels across the Caribbean. His name was synonymous with success, his face often plastered across business magazines, praised for his rags-to-riches journey. But behind the charm, behind the picture-perfect family portraits with his wife, Camille Sinclair, and their 2 children, Michael harbored dark secrets. Secrets that would one day lead to his downfall. Michael wasn't just a businessman, he was a king. He controlled politicians, law enforcement, and the underbelly of Jamaica's elite. From his lavish estate in the hills of Cherry Gardens, he hosted extravagant parties, entertaining celebrities, investors, and the country's most powerful figures. His wife, Camille, the stunning and intelligent daughter of a former government official, was the epitome of grace and loyalty. Together, they were Kingston's power couple, admired, envied, untouchable. But what Camille didn't know, or rather, chose to ignore, was that her husband had a taste for extravagant infidelity. Michael had multiple mistresses, scattered across the islands, models, socialites, even married women of the elite. Money bought silence, power ensured loyalty, and threats guaranteed discretion. For years, he lived a double life, perfectly maintaining his public image while indulging in secret affairs. But no king rules forever, and no secret remains buried forever. It all started with one woman, Eva Mendoza. A 25-year-old Dominican model, Eva was unlike the others. Beautiful, ambitious, and dangerously obsessed. She didn't want to be another disposable mistress. She wanted more. She wanted Michael Sinclair to herself. It was Eva's arrival into his life that set off a chain of events leading to betrayal, revenge, and murder. Little did Michael know, his greatest sin wasn't his infidelity. It was underestimating the women in his life. His reign as the untouchable king of Kingston was about to come crashing down. In the dim glow of a secluded VIP lounge in Montego Bay's most exclusive resort, Michael Sinclair leaned back in his leather chair, a glass of aged rum in his hand. Across from him sat Eva Mendoza, a woman whose beauty could bring any man to his knees. Eva wasn't just another fling. She was his escape, his addiction. At 25 years old, the Dominican-born model had captivated Michael in ways no other woman had. With long, flowing black hair, piercing hazel eyes, and a curvaceous figure that turned heads in every room, she carried herself with a dangerous mix of seduction and ambition. She was nothing like Camille, his elegant but reserved wife. Eva was wild, unpredictable, and fearless. For months, Michael had kept her as his most prized secret. He showered her with expensive gifts, a beachfront penthouse, designer clothing, and wads of cash to keep her happy. But Eva wasn't the type to be satisfied with material things. She wanted more. She wanted Michael to leave his wife. One evening, as the waves crashed against the shore outside her penthouse, Eva confronted Michael. "I'm tired of being your secret," she said, her voice laced with frustration. "You promised me more." Michael chuckled, placing his hands on her waist. "You know how this works, baby. Camille is my wife. My business depends on my reputation." Eva pulled away, her eyes burning with anger. "Your reputation? What about me? I've given you everything, and you think I'll just sit here like a fool while you keep me hidden?" Michael sighed, already annoyed. He had heard these kinds of ultimatums before. Women always wanted more, but they always ended up staying. But Eva wasn't like the others. Later that night, while Michael slept beside her, Eva made a decision that would change everything. She reached for her phone and dialed a number, a private investigator. If Michael wouldn't leave his wife, then she would destroy his marriage herself. For years, Camille Sinclair had turned a blind eye to her husband's infidelities. She wasn't naive. She had seen the signs. The late-night meetings, the sudden weekend business trips, the lipstick stains on his shirts. But she played the perfect wife. She smiled for the cameras, attended charity events, and raised their children with grace and dignity. Divorce was never an option, not for a woman of her stature. But when an anonymous package arrived at their Cherry Gardens estate, everything changed. Inside was a USB drive. Trembling, Camille plugged it into her laptop. What she saw shattered her world. Photos, videos, text messages. Michael with Ava. Michael with other women. Proof that her husband had been betraying her for years. But what hurt the most wasn't the affairs. It was the disrespect. One of the women was her own friend. Camille stared at the screen, her face a mask of cold rage. Michael thought he was untouchable. He was wrong, because now Camille was ready to play dirty. Camille Sinclair sat in the darkness of her bedroom, staring at the screen that had just shattered her world. The images of her husband entangled with Ava Mendoza and other women played in an endless loop, each frame tightening the grip of fury around her chest. For years, she had ignored the whispers, the late nights, the expensive gifts that weren't for her. She had played the role of the dutiful wife, smiled at charity galas, and hosted Kingston's elite at their lavish mansion. But now Michael had humiliated her. The knowledge that one of his mistresses was her own friend was the final betrayal. Camille clenched her fists. Divorce was too easy. Michael Sinclair needed to suffer. Across town, in her luxurious penthouse overlooking the Caribbean Sea, Ava Mendoza sipped a glass of wine, a smirk playing on her lips. She had done exactly what she intended, expose Michael's dirty secrets. She wanted control. She wanted Camille out of the picture. But Michael? He was resisting. The billionaire had distanced himself over the past few weeks, sending fewer texts, avoiding meetings, and acting as if she no longer mattered. Ava wasn't one to be ignored. So she played her next hand. She threatened him. One evening, as Michael arrived at their usual discreet villa on the outskirts of Montego Bay, Ava greeted him not with a kiss, but with a flash drive. "What's this?" Michael asked, annoyed. Ava leaned in close, her breath warm against his ear. "Insurance." Michael plugged the device into his laptop and watched. There he was, caught on hidden cameras. In bed, in cars, in hotels, with her, with others. Ava ran a hand down his chest and whispered, "If you leave me, Camille gets this." Michael's jaw tightened. No one threatened him. He grabbed Ava's wrist, his grip firm. "You have no idea who you're playing with, sweetheart." Ava simply laughed. "Neither do you." Days later, Camille sat at a dimly lit bar in a secluded area of Kingston. Across from her sat a man known for solving problems, permanently. A hitman. She slid an envelope across the table. Inside, photos of Michael and Ava. His schedule. The locations where he would be alone. The man opened it, glancing at the contents. "You sure about this?" he asked. Camille took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "My husband is already dead to me." The hitman nodded. The plan was set. Michael Sinclair had just days left to live. The night air was thick with the scent of the ocean as Michael Sinclair stood on the balcony of his private resort in Montego Bay, oblivious to the fact that his days were numbered. In his world, power meant control, and control meant no one could touch him. He had dealt with blackmail before, had buried scandals beneath mountains of money. Ava Mendoza thought she was clever, but she was just another woman who had let emotions cloud her judgment. As for Camille, Michael assumed she would do what she always did, turn a blind eye. He underestimated them both. The plan was simple. Camille had ensured that Michael would be alone at the secluded villa on Thursday night. His security team had been given the night off, a small reward for their loyalty, but in reality, it was a trap. That night, as Michael poured himself a drink, his phone buzzed. Ava, come over. Now, I need you." Michael smirked. Even after threatening him, she still couldn't stay away. Typical. What he didn't know was that Ava had received a similar message, one that she assumed came from Michael. "Michael, meet me at the villa. No more secrets. Let's fix this." But Michael never sent that text. And Ava wasn't the only one on her way. At 10:45 p.m., Ava walked into the villa, dressed in a sleek black dress. Her mind raced with thoughts of victory. She had won. Michael had finally come to his senses. But as she stepped inside, she froze. Camille was sitting in the dimly lit room, a glass of wine in hand. "Took you long enough," Camille said, her voice dripping with venom. Ava's heart pounded. "Where's Michael?" Camille smiled. "On his way." Seconds later, the door opened. Michael stepped inside and stopped cold. His eyes darted between his wife and his mistress. "What the hell is this?" Before anyone could react, the sound of a gun cocking filled the room. From the shadows, a masked figure emerged. The hitman. Michael lunged for his phone, but before he could reach it, a gunshot rang out. The bullet tore through his shoulder, sending him crashing to the ground. Blood seeped into his crisp white shirt as he gasped in pain. Ava screamed, "What's happening?" Camille stood up, her expression eerily calm. "You played your game, Michael. Now it's my turn." Michael groaned, trying to push himself up, but the hitman pressed the barrel of the gun to his forehead. Ava, shaking, turned to Camille. You set this up?" Camille smirked. "You handed me all the evidence. You made it easy." Ava's stomach dropped. She had been used. Michael coughed, blood dripping from his lips. "You don't have the guts, Camille." Camille leaned down, whispering into his ear. "I don't need to. I already paid someone who does." Before Michael could respond, another shot rang out. This time it was fatal. Michael Sinclair, the untouchable billionaire king of Kingston, was dead. His sins had finally caught up with him. The air inside the villa was thick with the scent of gunpowder and blood. Michael Sinclair's lifeless body lay sprawled on the expensive marble floor, a pool of crimson seeping from the fatal gunshot wound to his chest. His once commanding presence had been reduced to nothing more than a lifeless corpse. Camille took a slow, deliberate sip of her wine, her hands steady. Ava, on the other hand, was frozen in shock. Her breath came in sharp gasps, her eyes locked on the dead man she once seduced and manipulated. "Oh my God! What have you done?" she stammered, turning to Camille with terror. Camille smirked. "What I should have done a long time ago." The hitman, clad in dark clothing, wasted no time. He knelt beside Michael's body, checking for a pulse that wasn't there, then turned to Camille. "We need to move fast." Ava's panic only grew. "Move fast? You killed a billionaire. For Christ's sake. We're dead women walking." Camille arched an eyebrow. Darling, I didn't pull the trigger. And soon. All the evidence will say you did." Ava's heart stopped. "What?" The hitman moved swiftly, slipping on gloves before grabbing the gun. He wiped Camille's fingerprints clean, and then placed the weapon in Ava's trembling hands. "No! No, no, no! Please!" Ava screamed, trying to pull away, but Camille grabbed her by the chin. "You wanted Michael all to yourself, didn't you?" Camille hissed. "Well, congratulations. Now the whole world will believe you killed him in a fit of passion." Ava struggled, but the hitman was too strong. He forced her fingers around the gun, pressing them firmly. Ava's fingerprints were now on the murder weapon. Tears streamed down her face. "You set me up? You planned this?" Camille gave a small shrug. "You played a dirty game, Ava. You just didn't know I was always 5 steps ahead." Ava collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. But Camille had no time for remorse. Camille turned to the hitman. "Make sure everything looks right." The man nodded and set to work. He staged the scene to look like a lover's quarrel gone wrong, a crime of passion. He wiped down any surfaces Camille had touched. He hacked into Michael's phone, sending a final message to Ava's number. "We need to talk. Come alone." He even took Ava's purse and scattered its contents to make it seem like a heated struggle took place. Everything pointed to Ava Mendoza. Camille glanced at her watch. It was 11:30 p.m. By the time anyone found Michael, she would be far away. She pulled out her phone and sent a message to her personal assistant. "Emergency trip. Get the jet ready. Paris. Tonight." Then, she turned to Ava one last time. watching as the woman sat trembling in a crime scene she couldn't escape. "Goodbye, Ava," Camille said smoothly. "Enjoy your new home in prison." Ava tried to scream, but Camille was already walking out, her heels clicking softly against the blood-stained floor. The sun had barely risen over Kingston when the news broke. Michael Sinclair, one of Jamaica's wealthiest and most powerful men, had been found murdered in his private villa. The headlines screamed scandal, betrayal, and blood. By 6 a.m., police cars and forensic units swarmed the luxurious estate, their flashing lights reflecting off the pristine marble driveway. The scene inside was gruesome. Michael's lifeless body lay in a pool of blood, the murder weapon discarded beside him. And in the middle of it all, Ava Mendoza. She was curled up on the floor, her makeup smeared with tears, her body shaking. Her fingerprints were on the gun. When the police arrived, she didn't resist. She couldn't, because everything pointed to her. Detective Joel Patterson stepped into the villa, his sharp eyes scanning the crime scene. He had seen a lot of murders of passion in his career, and this one fit the script perfectly. A wealthy businessman, a jealous mistress, a heated argument that ended in bloodshed. As he approached Ava, an officer read her rights aloud. "Ava Mendoza, you are under arrest for the murder of Michael Sinclair." Ava sobbed uncontrollably, shaking her head. "No, I didn't do this. I swear to God. I didn't kill him." Detective Patterson crouched down beside her. "Then tell me what happened." Ava gulped in air, trying to speak. "It wasn't me. It was Camille. Camille set me up." The detective's expression remained neutral. Camille Sinclair, Michael's wife, the grieving widow. Could Ava be telling the truth? Or was this just a desperate woman trying to shift the blame? At 10 a.m., Camille Sinclair arrived at the police station, dressed in black with oversized sunglasses covering her eyes. She played her role perfectly. The heartbroken widow, the devoted wife whose world had just been shattered. The press swarmed her. "Mrs. Sinclair, do you believe Ava Mendoza killed your husband?" Camille let a single tear slip down her cheek. "I trusted that woman," she whispered, her voice breaking. "And she betrayed us all." Inside the police station, Detective Patterson watched her closely. Something about Camille didn't sit right with him. She wasn't mourning. She was performing. Locked in an interrogation room, Ava clutched the metal table in front of her. She knew she was running out of time. Detective Patterson sat across from her, arms crossed. "Tell me why I shouldn't charge you with murder." Ava leaned forward, desperation in her eyes. "Camille planned everything," she whispered. "She lured me there. She hired a hitman. She made sure my fingerprints were on the gun." Patterson raised an eyebrow. "You expect me to believe Michael's wife planned his murder and framed you?" Ava nodded furiously. "Check the surveillance cameras. Check Camille's bank transactions. She paid someone to do this." "I know she did." Patterson scribbled something in his notebook, then stood. "We'll see if your story checks out." As he walked out, Ava collapsed against the table, sobbing. She had one last chance to prove her innocence. And if Camille had covered her tracks, then Ava Mendoza was as good as dead. Detective Joel Patterson wasn't the type to take things at face value. Something about Camille Sinclair felt too perfect, too rehearsed. The way she wept on command, the way she controlled the media narrative, it all seemed calculated. But he needed more than suspicion. He needed evidence. So, while Ava Mendoza sat behind bars, begging for justice, Patterson and his team got to work. And it didn't take long for the cracks in Camille's story to show. Michael Sinclair's multi-million-dollar villa was equipped with a top-of-the-line security system, cameras in every hallway, motion sensors, and biometric locks. Yet, when the police accessed the security footage from the night of the murder, something was off. The system had been manually disabled between 10:30 p.m. and 12:15 a.m., right when Michael was murdered. Whoever did it knew the system inside and out. Ava Mendoza wasn't that person. But Camille? She had access to everything. Patterson assigned Detective Lisa Carter, an expert in financial crimes, to dig into Camille's accounts. What she found was shocking. 2 days before Michael's murder, Camille transferred $250,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The account was under a fake name. The money was withdrawn the day after Michael's murder. And most damning of all, the recipient was a known contract killer. Camille hadn't just planned Michael's murder, she had paid for it. By the time the police started connecting the dots, Camille was already halfway to Paris. Detective Patterson's team obtained records showing that she booked the private jet just an hour after Michael's death. This wasn't a grieving widow running from her pain. This was a woman escaping justice. With the evidence piling up, Detective Patterson filed a warrant for Camille Sinclair's arrest. Ava Mendoza wasn't the killer. Camille Sinclair was. But there was a problem. She was out of the country, and bringing down a billionaire widow wasn't going to be easy. Patterson knew one thing for sure. Camille Sinclair might think she got away with murder, but he wasn't done yet. Camille Sinclair had always been a woman of strategy. From the moment she married Michael, she had played the role of the devoted wife, the socialite, the businesswoman. Now she was something else entirely, a fugitive. By the time the police had gathered enough evidence to issue her arrest warrant, Camille was already in France, hiding behind layers of wealth, power, and deception. But Detective Joel Patterson wasn't about to let her disappear. Not this time. The moment Camille's plane landed in Paris, she thought she was safe. She had access to millions, offshore accounts, and a network of high-profile allies who could protect her. But Patterson was already one step ahead. Through his connections, he got Interpol involved. Within 24 hours, a global red notice was issued for Camille Sinclair. Her accounts were flagged. Her known associates were monitored. The net was tightening, and Camille knew it. Back in Jamaica, Ava Mendoza was still locked up. But everything had changed. Once the news broke that Camille had fled the country, the media turned against her. Ava was no longer seen as the jealous mistress. She was now the wrongfully accused woman, and she was ready to fight back. In an exclusive interview from jail, Ava told her side of the story, how Camille manipulated Michael's love for her to stage the perfect murder, how she lured Ava to the villa just in time to be framed, how Michael had planned to divorce Camille, and that's why she had him killed. The world listened, and now Camille had nowhere to hide. Days turned into weeks. Interpol tracked Camille across Europe, from luxury hotels in Paris to a secluded villa in Switzerland. Every time they got close, she slipped away, until she made one fatal mistake. Camille had been using a fake passport under the alias Sophie Laurent. But in Milan, Italy, she got careless. At a high-end shopping district, Camille used one of her flagged credit cards. Within minutes, Italian authorities had her surrounded. There was no escape. Camille Sinclair, the billionaire widow, was finally in custody. The arrest of Camille Sinclair sent shockwaves through the world. The wealthy widow, once adored by the elite circles of Kingston and Paris, was now facing the very people who had worshipped her for years. Her trial would not just be a battle of legal tactics, it would be the trial of the century in Jamaica. Every news outlet covered the case, and for the first time, Ava Mendoza was seen not as a criminal, but as a woman who had been wronged. But the real question on everyone's mind was, why did Camille Sinclair murder her husband? When the courtroom doors opened, Camille Sinclair walked in with her head held high. But even the most skilled defense attorneys couldn't conceal the damning evidence against her. The prosecution, led by Attorney General Margaret Douglas, wasted no time in laying out the facts. Camille Sinclair had orchestrated the murder of her husband, Michael, to collect on his multi-billion-dollar estate and secure her own financial freedom. She had hired a hitman to carry out the murder and had transferred $250,000 to his offshore account. Surveillance footage and phone records proved Camille's involvement in the manipulation of Ava Mendoza, creating a false narrative of betrayal to frame her. Her financial transactions and travel records proved that she had been planning Michael's death for weeks. The evidence was irrefutable. But there was more. After weeks of testimonies and legal drama, the moment finally arrived. Ava Mendoza took the stand. Clad in a simple dress, her once distraught face now exuding a sense of determined clarity, Ava recounted her relationship with Michael and the shocking events that had led to his death. Camille was always in control, Ava testified. She controlled Michael, she controlled his money, and she controlled me. She described how Camille had manipulated her feelings, making her believe she was the one to blame for Michael's death. Ava's words were like a dagger to Camille's pristine image. She had once been a victim of jealousy, and now she was the hero of her own story. Camille's defense team, led by the slick and confident William Chambers, immediately sought to discredit Ava's testimony. They painted her as a jilted lover, driven by revenge and desperate to shift the blame. Ava Mendoza is the one who killed Michael Sinclair, Chambers argued. She was the one who had the motive to be with him and to keep his wealth. Camille, in her grief, is being unfairly accused. Chambers went so far as to suggest that Ava had killed Michael in a fit of passion, setting up the scene to make it appear as though Camille had orchestrated the murder. But every attempt to divert attention back onto Ava was met with overwhelming evidence from the prosecution. The trial reached its most crucial point when Camille Sinclair took the stand in her own defense. Her once controlled demeanor began to unravel as she was cross-examined by Attorney General Margaret Douglas. As Camille tried to explain herself, she lost her composure. She was no longer the confident woman who had manipulated every room she entered. "I loved Michael," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "He was my life. I would never hurt him." But Douglas pressed her further. "Then why did you hire a hitman to kill your husband?" "I didn't do that. I didn't. Ava did it." The room fell silent as Camille's outburst echoed throughout the courtroom. After weeks of deliberation, the courtroom finally fell into a tense silence as the jury prepared to deliver their verdict. Everyone knew what the evidence suggested. Everyone knew Camille Sinclair was guilty. But the question was, would the jury be swayed by her charm and status? The moment arrived. We, the jury, find the defendant, Camille Sinclair, guilty of the murder of Michael Sinclair. A sigh of relief rippled through the courtroom. Ava, who had been seated in the front row, exhaled sharply. The weight of the last several months was finally lifting from her shoulders. But Camille's reaction was nothing like anyone had expected. She simply stared straight ahead, emotionless. She had lost, but she wasn't done yet. The gavel came down, and Camille Sinclair's world came crashing to a halt. Her life of opulence, her years of manipulating those around her, her wealth and status, all of it shattered in an instant. Guilty. The word echoed in her mind as the courtroom buzzed with whispers. She had been the queen of Kingston, the envy of socialites, the untouchable billionaire wife. Now she was a murderer, her life reduced to a court case, a headline, and a fall from grace. Camille's conviction shook the foundation of Kingston's high society. The powerful Sinclair name had long been a symbol of wealth, success, and untouchability. Now it was associated with betrayal and murder.